Today our guest is Jerry Mathers, the star of Leave It to Beaver. He's been in the industry since he was 4 years old, and he has a lot of memories to share. I used to host a show called Media Memories, and so I asked Jerry a lot of questions about things that impacted him from the media in the past.
Let's start with television. Since you were in television, what did you watch when you were a child?
Well, honestly, I didn't have a whole lot of time to watch TV as a child. But I fairly much watched the mainstream TV shows of the time. Probably the most popular show when I was doing Leave It to Beaver was the show that we ran against, which was Maverick. And so I used to pretty much watch Maverick every week.
So you wouldn't watch your own show?
No, not that I didn't like it, but I mean I knew the entire plot. I'd seen it probably for a whole week, plus we'd go back in and we'd have to do looping and editing on it. Then that's when a line doesn't sound right or there's an airplane or a noise over it. You go in and dub it over. So I'd probably seen the show 3 or 4 times before it was ever on the air, the entire show. So I pretty much watched all the different things that were on. There were a lot of westerns on at that time. There was Gunsmoke and Maverick and
that was your favorite genre for television?
At that time, yeah. As I say, I was about 8 or 9 years old up till the time I was about 13. And as I say, westerns were very exciting at that time.
Mm-hmm. What about music? What kind of music did you like?
Well, I pretty much like rock and roll. I mean, I was of that generation. My favorite band right now is probably Oingo Boingo, and my favorite all-time band is probably Cream. So I like kind of a jazzy, more rock and roll than the real hardcore or the rap music.
Now, you had a group, right? What was it called? Beaver and the Trappers?
Beaver and the Trappers. In fact, when I was in high school, people always say, did people know you for being the Beaver? Well, not really, because what they really knew me for was this band. We would play all the proms and sock hops in the area. And we used to record for Atlantic Records. We had a #1 song, but it was #1 only in Alaska and Hawaii. It made a bullet in the on the sheets, and I think it went up to like maybe 40th or 50th in the nation. It never really broke as a song. But what that was basically a summer job for me. During the winter, as I say, or during the school year, we'd play all the proms and sock hops, and then during the summer we'd go into different places like Boston and we'd play the different amusement parks there. So it was more of a summer job than anything else, and it was a lot of fun.
And at one point, did you want to use that as a career? You wanted to go into recording as a career?
No, not really. As I say, it was more of a summer job. Other people, I just had an advantage. A lot of people had to work as box boys or had to work at the car wash. Because we were known for this band, it was a friend of mine, Rich Correll, and 2 other people, and that was very much in the time when the Beatles were coming in.
Wasn't Rich Correll on Leave It to Beaver?
He was on Leave It to Beaver.
He was Richard.
Yeah, he was Richard Rickover, and now he's a director. He directs all sorts of the Friday and Saturday night lineups on ABC. So, in fact, he's one of the few. He's honored the other day by the Directors Guild because he had 3 shows showing back to back on the Friday night special thing. 3 of those half-hour shows that he'd done at different...
the TGIF Friday night thing?
Right, the TGIF.
You're kidding.
He'd done 3 shows at different times, but they all showed for the first time right in a row. So he had basically an hour and a half that he had directed on prime time, and that had never been done by a director before.
Wow. Now, you also directed, too. I think you directed some new Leave It to Beavers.
I directed some of the new Leave It to Beavers. I direct a lot of industrial films. I do some commercials. I enjoy directing. Actually, directing is probably... It is actually a lot more interesting than being an actor. The reason is when you're an actor, you walk in, and first of all, you're given a script, and then the director tells you how to say it, and you're dressed in certain wardrobe, but there's not a whole lot of freedom of style. When you're the director, you go in with the writers and you discuss how it's going to be filmed, and you have your vision, and then you try to put it into film or tape.
Yeah. Just a couple highlights of what you did from a media standpoint. You did the Academy Awards.
I've been a presenter at the Academy Awards.
And you did it in your Air Force outfit.
Right, because I was a member of the service at that time. I just gotten out of boot camp, so my head is still, I still have the buzz haircut because just the day before you leave, they give you a buzz just to make sure that you've got the right haircut.
Why did they choose you to do the Academy Awards that year?
I don't really know. I gave it, it's a great honor, but it's like a lot of other honors. They just call you up and say, "Are you available?" And my parents knew that I was going to be on leave because I got, I think it was a week or 2 weeks off between the time when you finish basic training before you go on to your next level of training. They sent you home. So my parents knew I'd be home at that time, and I gave the award to Gene Kelly for Picture of the Year, Angel Cartwright, and myself.
You were an adult at the time, so obviously you remember this. Sometimes when we go back to Beaver days, you probably don't remember a lot of that stuff, but you've got to remember being on the Academy Awards.
Oh, very definitely. It was 1967, and it was a big thing. We went there.
It's huge, yeah.
Oh yeah, and you go there, and you go with all your peers, and it's quite an honor. As I say, it's something that I've attended, quite a few times. But
you have.
But that was the only time I got to actually be a presenter, and I've never ever been nominated for one. So it's probably as close as I'll ever get.
What's your favorite medium?
Probably radio. Radio for me is first of all, it's real interactive because I do a lot of talk shows and I do a lot of relating with the audience. But as I said, with all the other media, somebody else does a lot of the work for you, and you just basically put it. Even as a director, the writer's the one that's basically gotten the vision. In radio, what happens is you sit down in a little room and they say, "Okay, you're going to be on for the next 5 hours." When that red light goes on, you're on the air. So it basically comes right off the top of your head. So,
did you listen to much radio as a kid?
I did probably more than most other children because I used to have to drive to and from the studio for an hour each way. So for that hour in the morning and that hour coming home in the car with my mother, we would basically listen just like anyone else would, any commuter. We would basically listen to the radio.
Gosh, you got used to commuting at an early age then.
Very, very early.
What types of formats have you worked in? Basically rock and roll, oldies?
Rock and roll, oldies, talk radio. I find talk radio a little harder for me, and the reason is I've just gotten out of, not just, about probably 3 months ago, working in Milwaukee. I was working there. A friend of mine, Jonathan Green, who's been on the air for 18 years, developed polyps in his throat. So I came on and did his show, and it was 5 hours a day of talk radio. The problem is when you go into a city like Milwaukee and you're not as familiar with the local issues, it makes it very hard to do talk radio. Somebody calls up the first day and says, "Well, what do you think about gambling in Milwaukee?" And you have to say, "Well, gee, I don't know that much about it." National issues, of course, I'm much more versed in, but what they're basically wanting to talk about is local issues. So that makes it a lot harder. You really have to study your newspaper and do a lot of extra work when you do talk radio. When you do rock and roll, it's very easy, especially oldies, because almost any oldie station is playing pretty much the same type of sound. So, you can go in and talk about Hot Rod Lincoln in one state and Hot Rod Lincoln in the next state and say basically the same thing.
When you go on a talk radio station, do people treat you seriously at first when you're hosting a show?
Well, usually the first day, most of the questions are about Leave It to Beaver or about being an actor. And by the second or third day, we kind of bait them. You sit there and you say, "Well, what do you think about this?" And, hey, Milwaukee, what do you think about this? And so by about the second or the third day, it comes to a point where they want to interact with you and really see what somebody from outside their area maybe is thinking.
Mm-hmm. Now, I had asked you before about films, and you told me, who is your favorite movie artist?
Well, I like Buster Keaton. I like Wallace Beery. Of course, I like John Wayne.
Let's just stop at the Buster Keaton and Wallace Beery. I think that would surprise people, because you weren't even alive, of course, when the movies first came out. What got you into looking at those old films?
Well, there's some of the, especially Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton developed a lot of the techniques that movie makers still use. People don't realize that, but when they started making movies in the early 1900s, most of the trick photography and the different techniques of even different shots to use, nobody really knew. Basically these people were just given a camera and told to come back with a 1 or 2 reeler. So all the techniques were basically developed by these people. And so when you go back and watch the movies that they made, and you can see how they build. You can watch one of the earlier movies, and it's basically just one shot, a lot of long shots. Suddenly they're doing close-ups, then they're doing 2 shots. And with Buster Keaton, he had grown up on a vaudevillian stage, so he did all his own stunts. And a lot of the stuff he did, I would imagine most stuntmen today, you couldn't pay him enough to do it, and here he's doing his own stunts.
Is that something that you long to do, to be a stunt like?
No, I've seen those people. It's kind of like football players. They're real nice people, and you meet them when they're 18 or 19, and they're in real great shape, and then you meet them a few years later, and to be honest with you, most of them sooner or later get hurt and have to retire. So it's like a football player. They get paid a lot of money for what they do. But, that's why they call it stunt work. There's very inherent dangers to doing that kind of work.
Did you ever meet Buster Keaton?
No, never did. He was fairly much retired by the time that I was onto the scene.
Who are the people, and you are crowded around all the time, constantly.
For best children's late.
Who's somebody that you would go out of your way to meet and just say, this is a honest-to-goodness thrill?
That's a tough one. I meet people all the time, and so I don't think I'm as thrilled by anybody.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody that I would. Eric Clapton would be one. As I say, I like Eric Clapton. I like his guitar work. But it's the kind of thing that if I was at a party with him, I might go over and say hi. But
you know the real people. Your wife's in a catering business with the movie studios, so you've
Right.
seen a lot of these people in their bad moments.
And I see them all the time. And it's to be honest with you, it's not as much of a thrill for me. I've worked with Hitchcock. I've worked with Bob Hope. I've met probably almost anybody that you can think of that's a major actor or performer. And so, for me, they're more friends. I mean, of course, to be honest with you, they're not my best friends, and I wouldn't want anybody to think that. But I mean, I go to a lot of parties where these people are there, and I'm introduced, and we talk, and it's kind of like they're colleagues of mine. So it's not like I get as excited as maybe somebody who'd never met any celebrities.
So why do we get excited about them?
Well, I think it's as I say, I may be jaded because I've met so many people. It's the kind of thing they're very interesting people, and they're fun to meet, and I enjoy speaking with them. A lot of them are very, very bright people, and they're very interesting to talk to, and others aren't.
I'm going to give you, here's my thesis. I've met a lot of people. I met one of my big favorite stars is Mary Tyler Moore, or I saw Cary Grant just 2 months before he died, and I just, that was the ultimate for me. I thought he was the greatest movie actor, but I was always disappointed.
Well, that's true, too. I mean, I think that, that's a problem, and that's one of the reasons I don't go out of my way to meet a lot of people, because when you've built something up in your mind, you have a vision of what that person should be, and that person probably for the most part will never live up to your vision. I mean, they're real people. I'm sure they have a lot of virtues, but they probably also have a lot of faults. And so when you've got this idea of this is the way they have to be because this is the way you've pictured them, and you're not exactly that way, maybe they're not as tall as you thought they were, maybe they put on a little weight, maybe they look older, especially the female performers. I mean, a lot of people think that that's what the way they look on the screen in their glamorous role is the way they're going to meet them on the street. Well, they have to realize that for the most part, any actor, when you go in to do a show, you usually go in for at least a male probably an hour of hair and probably an hour to an hour and a half of makeup. A female performer probably goes in for 2.5 hours of hair and maybe another 2 hours of makeup. So, plus you've got people that are your wardrobe people. They've taken that's their whole job to make sure that you look the very best you can in your costume. And so there's, when you see them on the screen, it's a facade. It's not a real person. It's what they've been meant to look like.
The other factor is that we treat them as their screen roles.
That's very true. In fact, that's why in a lot of ways, having played the Beaver, I'm very lucky because people relate to me on a very friendly level, and they think, that basically they've grown up with me. It's kind of funny. I know when I'm signing autographs, I'll say, well, who would you like it to? And they say, well, just put it to my name. And I say, well, what's your name? And then they're kind of taken back because they think, well, gee, I know your name's Jerry. Why don't you know my name?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny that people just think that you know everything about them and their name, and you're really a friend of theirs, which is a great feeling. But as I say, you still have to ask what their name is to sign that autograph.
My impression of you is that you are probably closer to that screen image than most people I've seen. And maybe I'm wrong. You tell me if I'm wrong. Because you seem to be pretty clean-cut. After talking to your wife a couple of times, you're very concerned about making sure that your kids get a good education, that they pretty much stay straight, that they get good discipline. You're not a wild drinker or smoker. You seem to be attempting to uphold that family image.
Well, to be honest with you, it's not attempting to uphold it. It's just that it makes my life a lot easier to live that way. As I say, I'm a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley, so I did have some wild times when I was younger. But when you get married and you suddenly have kids, you say to yourself, what do I want my kids to see me as, and how do I want them to grow up? And if you live a certain lifestyle, you're going to have a lot of problems with your kids. And I just don't need those kind of problems. My wife and I, neither one of us need those kind of problems. So,
what do you let your kids watch and listen to then?
In that way, I'm very liberal, especially like my son is 16, and he can pretty much watch and listen to anything he wants. I mean, I think that I'm kind of a constitutionalist there. I think that I believe in free speech. Of course, I wouldn't let him watch something that's X-rated or whatever that new rating is now, NC-17 or whatever. That kind of thing. I would say no, you can't watch that. But as far as most things that are music, I don't really say that he can't listen to a certain group or that that he couldn't watch a certain TV show or that he couldn't see a certain movie. Because now maybe it's just because he's my child, but he's been around the movie industry long enough to know that even though somebody gets shot and it's very, very violent, I think in his mind he'll be saying, well, how did they do that? Gee, when that guy got shot, they had to put squibs in there and fake blood, and that's the way they did it. With my daughters, just because they're younger, I'm a little more conservative. I mean, there's a lot of shows on TV. I know one of the shows that they like is Blossom, but about a year or two ago they had a Blossom where she was going to go out and have her first affair. And so instead of telling them that they couldn't watch that, we just happened that night, we had a Disney film on video that we just happened to watch that night. So it wasn't like we said, no, you absolutely can't watch it. And if they'd have really wanted to, we probably would have said okay. But there are alternatives. You can make other things more attractive, and they happen to just skip that one. And as I say, I don't think they ever missed it.
I want to finish up asking about something that really bugs me. People complain about TV from the 50s as being unrealistic. And you constantly get this. I know that June Cleaver wore the pearls around her neck and the high heels when she was vacuuming, and Ward always wore a suit to supper. And yeah, I mean, in some ways that didn't probably happen in most families exactly like that. But the values and the situations, I think, were very real. And today's situation comedies almost seem absurd to me, that they're taking reality and pushing it to the extremes, whereas 50s TV seemed much more real. The point I'm trying to make is I long for 50s television. I love Nick at Night. I wish we had more shows like that on today. But from your perspective, am I really off base, or am I kind of out in left field thinking that the 50s was reality?
Well, it's kind of a long answer, but first of all, I'll tell you why June Cleaver always wore pearls. The reason is that Barbara Billingsley was a very, very skinny New York model, and she had blonde hair. And when they went to lighter, what would happen was, because of her complexion, the lights that they put on her would make her, the two muscles in her neck would make it look like a tracheotomy, the shadow that they cast. And because of that, they needed a piece of jewelry that would cut across that part of her neck, and the pearls just happened to be a piece of jewelry that wasn't all that formal, that they thought she could wear every day. So that's why she wore the pearls, and because she had the pearls on, they put her in high heels. Hugh Beaumont did wear a tie to dinner every night, but my dad was a teacher, and he would come home every night, and he would wear a suit and a tie to work all day, and a lot of times he would just take off his tie, but sometimes if he was too tired, he'd just loosen it. So a lot of the times when my family had dinner, my father would be dressed in a suit and a tie, and as I say, it wasn't a matter that he went and put it on, it was a matter that he would have had to change, and he was tired after working that many hours. So that's, I think some families did that, and other families, had a father that maybe worked in a construction job, or that maybe worked in an assembly line on a factory, and they probably came home in whatever they were dressed in, that's probably what they ate in. I think the big problem you have nowadays with situation comedies is, and I found this when we did the new Leave It to Beaver, you want people to tune it in, and they do what they call bumpers. And so what they do is they have to have 10 seconds to show all during the day and all during the week when the show's on prime time, to get people to tune in. So what they do is they have these really absurd things that they have to write into the script so that they can use them as bumpers. And they're the things when they say, it's the new Leave It to Beaver, and see Wally wear a dress, or see this or that happen. And people tune in for that. Well, to write those into the show, we had to do all sorts of things like dream sequences and all sorts of things they're really idiotic. Yeah. But what it was for was to capture the people's attention so that they won't watch whatever on the other 3 networks and all the other independent shows or independent stations that day. I think when they wrote in the 50s, they wrote a lot more about ethics and morals. And even with Leave It to Beaver, and I'll take that as a prime example, you can watch that. When you watch this show, it doesn't just come out and hit you over the head, but there's usually something that's going on in the show where there's a moral dilemma, and then in some way that dilemma is solved by the end of the show. In the situation comedies that I'm doing now, and I'm working on all the time. I've worked in Married with Children, which probably gets the biggest rap of all for being one of the worst. I just last week working on Phenom. And for the most part, those shows are written as joke shows. And what happens is anywhere from 5 to sometimes 10 to 15 to 20 writers sit around a desk, and they sit there and they say, okay, well, let's write some jokes. And they have a very, very vague storyline, and then they just write jokes, and that's the entire plot of that half-hour situation comedy. And so there's no real moral dilemma. It's just a joke show, and people watch it, and their theory is that people watch it, listen to the jokes, and laugh.
Well, it's not really a situation comedy then either, because the situation isn't driving the humor. Instead, it's the jokes.
Right. It's set up, joke. Set up, joke, for the most part.
Well, that's probably why the most popular shows are from stand-up comedians.
Right, because as I say, they're the people that, and they bring the people that are their staffs that have been writing their stand-up comedian, their stand-up work for many, many years. And so, that's, but what the other side of that coin is, those are the number one rated shows right now. And so whatever people will watch, and especially what people will watch in droves, are going to be what you're going to get. So you're not going to go back to 50s TV when people will accept and even send to the top those kind of shows.
So is it okay? Is it okay that I like old Leave It to Beaver reruns and want my kids to see that?
I think it's fine. As I say, I think some of the best television, they call it the golden age of television, and I think there's a very good reason for it. Most of those writers, to be honest with you, came out of radio. And when they were doing radio, they were writing, like the writers for Leave It to Beaver came out of Amos and Andy. They had to come up with 15 minutes of quality dialogue because they couldn't rely on what you could see. It was only the mental pictures you could make in your head every day. And so when they had a half hour that they had to write, but had a whole week to write it, they could obviously spend a lot more time with it and write it a lot better. The writers that are on most of the shows today are kids that come right out of college. They have a few life experiences, but not a whole lot. They go to Hollywood, and as I say, they get into one of these writing teams where they sit around a table, and so basically all they know is how to write jokes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you've just been fantastic here in Des Moines. I just think you're a fabulous person, and you've just gone overboard to make sure that you sign an extra autograph and be nice to people. And so I'm proud of you because you are upholding that image. You're not.
Well, as I say, that's just so easy. It's so easy to sign an autograph and really make somebody's day, and it's and the people are so nice here, and in fact all across the country. I've always found this, that it's real easy. My father has a saying: it's nice to be nice to the nice, but it's also real easy to be nice to nice people. So it's not really work. It's a lot of fun, and I meet a lot of interesting people that way.
Great, thanks, Jerry.